and welcome to the big fight. Terror returning once again to India. It's not that we are strangers to terror. We've been living with terror now in one form or the other for decades. It was Punjab terrorism, terrorism which emanated from Kashmir. And now we're being told this is a new face of terror, retaliatory terror, terror that is being claimed as being the handiwork of groups from right here in India. They call themselves Indian Mujahideen and other such groups. Before we go any further, though, we must try and understand, before we try and decide how you can tackle terror, we must understand what the face of terror is right now. And that's what we're going to attempt to do on the big fight today. We've got some of the leading experts in the field to help us doing just that. Let me start off by introducing my panel. In front of me, probably India's best-known terror fighter, certainly in the last 30 to 40 years, KPS Gill. It's great to have you with us here on the big fight. It's a pleasure that you could join us. Mr. I.D. Swamy, former Minister of State for Home during the NDA. You had to deal with it on a day-to-day basis when you were Minister of State for Home. We'll be fascinated to get your views right now. Margaret Alva of the Congress Party, it's great to have you with us as well on this show. Also joining us, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, former BJP party president. Mr. Naidu, your views, your party is taking some very strong views on how terrorism should be tackled. Shabnam Hashmi joining us right here in the studio, an activist in many forms. It gives us great pleasure to welcome from Pakistan, Lieutenant General Asad Durrani, former ISI chief. Here in India, we seem to think that the ISI is behind most of the terror attacks that take place. We'll be asking Lieutenant General Durrani whether that is in fact correct. And it gives me, finally, there's lots of experts today, two special experts who really understand, in a sense, what's happening. Praveen Swamy, probably the person who knows more about terrorism in India than just about anybody else whom I can think of. Praveen, great to have you, great to have you with us. And finally, last but not least, Feroz Ahmed. I don't know how to introduce you. Great-grandnephew of Maulana Azad, for one, but a well-known columnist. You've been writing a lot about the Muslim community and the face of terror in many ways. Wonderful to be getting your views as well. Thank you all so much for joining us. Let me start off with you, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu. Where do you think this wave of terrorism that we are seeing right now, the blast that we are seeing, where do you think it's coming from?
It's very clear. Terrorists are aided, abetted, funded and trained from across the border. It is not an isolated incident what has happened in Ahmedabad or Bangalore or even Jaipur or in other cities. It has been happening for years together. They wanted to subvert India, they want to cripple our economy, and they want to destroy the nation. It's a proxy war. If anybody has got any other illusion, then they are innocent. This is my view clearly.
Okay, let me just put that view then to the man who would know whether that proxy was happening. Lieutenant General Asad Durrani, let me turn to you next. Your former ISI chief, Lieutenant General Durrani, was a major item of your agenda when you were the ISI chief. Was your basic function to carry on what Venkaiah Naidu just called a proxy war against India? And is that still continuing? Are all these acts of terrorism coming from across the border?
We are talking about the present situation. And in the present situation, whenever you have suspicions like these, that people are coming from or are going from Pakistan to India, both the governments have very wisely worked out a mechanism. It's called Joint Anti-Terrorism Mechanism. And the idea is that in that forum, you present your evidence, you present your points of view, so that these are sorted out there. Otherwise, this old game in which both the countries keep blaming whatever happens in their country on the other side, that was actually stretching the point.
Okay, can I understand you when you say that is the situation today? Would it be fair to read between the lines and say there was a time when the ISI was behind every act of terror? May not be the case anymore?
I didn't say that. I said that because of these counter-accusations, now that the relations were much better, 4 or 5 years ago, we restarted the peace process, and in that the charges of terrorism were being put on each other. We finally found what I believe was a very good mechanism. Why not put that to test? That is what I'm saying.
Okay, let's put that to test. So, I.D. Swamy, you're one of the people who worked that out, that joint mechanism. Is it good? Is what he's saying something which is practical to do?
In fact, initially we didn't agree with the joint mechanism business. The victim and the aggressor being together to fight terrorism, that is something obnoxious. That doesn't work, that will not work, that has not worked. And if ISI was not playing its part, then when it was put under the civil administration, why the next day it had to be changed? The pressure from military, pressure from ISI was again brought, and ISI had to go back to with the army, under the army. So all these things show that the epicenter of all aggression, of all cross-border terrorism is in Pakistan, and even Musharraf's promise is made that my soil will not be used for any terrorist activity. Hence after, in SARC meeting, when he gave his signed statement with Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, the then Prime Minister, even he has gone back, the whole country, and we had some hopes now. When the civil administration had been restored after dictatorship, we thought, but all our hopes have been belied.
Okay, would you agree with that assessment? Epicenter still Pakistan, all terrorism coming from Pakistan.
I don't know whether we should limit ourselves to what's happened in the last 2 or 3 days. My point is that terrorism, I think, today is an international phenomenon. You are facing it from various parts of the world. We have lost 2 prime ministers, I mean 2 of our leaders, to acts of terrorism from other sources, other parts of the world.
Okay.
And therefore, I think it's a much bigger question. And I would say terrorism today has no national boundaries and is an international menace. Yeah, I think it's a much wider issue.
Okay.
I will agree with what Mr. Swami has said, because even in the old days, the Sikh terrorism was backed by ISI in a big way. And even today, Sikh terrorists are taking shelter in Pakistan. So, to say that Mrs. Gandhi's assassination was totally unlinked with what the ISI was doing is not correct.
Okay. Mr. Durrani, let me come back to you. Mr. Durrani, let's step aside from joint mechanisms and other things. Let's face it, you're right now in a position where the ISI is being blamed not just by India, which India has been doing it for 30 years, it's being blamed by Afghanistan. The United States is coming down and saying that the ISI is behind most acts of terrorism. It's not just, you can no longer say, well, it's India, why doesn't India show us the proof for it? It's now happening from around the world. Country after country is saying what was said a short while back, Pakistan is the epicenter of terror.
Before I can answer this question, let me also comment on what one of your participants just said, that the ISI did not want to go under a civilian control. That is not correct. The objection here was that the ISI should not be put under the Ministry of Interior. Nowhere in the world are such organizations under the interior ministries. The ISI, as far as the statute books are concerned, the law of the land is, it is under the Prime Minister. And there should be no problem if under the Prime Minister there is a secretariat where the ISI also functions. Now coming to the other one, this question that it is being blamed by everyone. Of course, in an environment where we are operating, and I'm talking now about Afghanistan and United States, where we have this problem on the western borders, Afghanistan not coming under control of the allies, and there the scapegoat can easily be the ISI, that, well, they were not doing enough to control the movement of the militants, without anyone probably trying to make it very clear that ISI or anyone else for that matter, it can be the whole mighty Pakistan army or the whole mighty NATO forces, they cannot control this movement.